Let's dive right in. Welcome to this explainer. We're about to embark on an absolutely wild journey into an ancient mystery. We usually look at relics from the past, especially those intricate carvings from ancient civilizations, and we view them through a pretty rigid modern lens. We tend to just see them as primitive alphabets or static historical markers, right? But what if we've been looking at them all wrong? What if some of these ancient inscriptions are actually complex, dynamic blueprints of the natural world? Today, we're exploring a fascinating hypothesis that bridges ancient linguistics, visual geometry, and the fundamental cycles of nature. And it all stems from one single, enigmatic carving from the temples of Thebes. Take a really good look at the raw artifact right here on your screen. Just ask yourself, what do you see at first glance? You're probably noticing a distinct bowl-like shape down at the bottom, a rigid vertical line reaching up on the left, a jagged zigzag pattern in the middle, and then another line curving back down on the right. Now, traditionally, historians and linguists would isolate these shapes and categorize them as individual phonetic symbols, just letters in a very old alphabet. But we are going to totally challenge that traditional view today. We're going to zoom in on the geometry, the deliberate spacing, and the undeniable mechanical flow carved right into this stone. All right, Section 1, the mystery of the ancient carving. To really crack this mystery, we've got to intentionally move past the idea that this is just a simple string of phonetic symbols. Instead, we're going to treat it like a hidden visual code. We're proposing a dynamic interpretation here. We're stepping away from a strictly linguistic understanding and moving toward a visual approach that sees this carving as a structural entity with actual movement and physical dimensions. So I really want to plant this seed of curiosity in your mind as we go. Are we looking at a static, frozen picture, or is this actually a dynamic blueprint of nature itself? Could it be that this ancient stone doesn't just spell a word, but actually encodes a complex natural process? The hypothesis we're unpacking today suggests this symbol isn't just making a sound, it's hypothetically simulating a periodic natural transformation. Moving on to Section 2, the visual geometry of the water cycle. Let's break down exactly how this physical simulation actually plays out. We're going to analyze the physical directions carved into the stone step by step, completely reimagining these lines not as text, but as vectors of movement. And what's incredibly cool here is how perfectly the carving's three distinct components mimic actual physics. First off, take a look at that upward vector. Visually, it's a vertical line driving up, which we can read as a symbolic representation of movement from bottom to top. Through a modern lens, this completely mirrors evaporation, matter shifting from a liquid to a gas because of energy. Second, we hit the upper curve. This is an inflection point, right? A transitional threshold where the state changes. You can think of this as condensation. And finally, we have the downward vector, showing a return movement back to the bottom. And our natural cycle, that's precipitation, rain falling back to earth. The shape itself is literally outlining the entire journey of water. Next up, Section 3, dissecting words, sky, and rain. Now, if mapping the water cycle onto an ancient stone carving blew your mind, just wait. Prepare yourself for a truly incredible reveal about how ancient vocabulary itself might be built directly from these natural cycles. This perfectly illustrates what we're talking about. Notice how modern visual analysis has been overlaid right onto the ancient carving. Look closely at those annotations. The cyan arrows clearly point out those upward and downward physical vectors we just talked about, evaporation and precipitation. But look at the text in the yellow circles and red boxes. The image on the left shows the Arabic words for water, pronounced ma, and stem, pronounced sak. It maps the concept of a rising stem directly to that upward vector, pointing towards the sky, sama. Then, the image on the right maps water and edge, taraf, to the downward falling vector resulting in rain, matar. The visuals are literally showing the vocabulary interacting with the physical geometric shape of the carving. Let's actually do the linguistic math here, because this is where the theory just gets brilliant. In this analysis, the signs aren't just independent phonetic units. They're elements combined inside a larger symbolic structure. Look at that top equation. We take the M sound from ma, meaning water, signifying its aquatic origin. Then we combine it with tar from taraf, meaning the edge or the limit. Water plus edge equals matar, rain. It is literally the moment water bursts from its upper limit in the clouds. Now for the second equation. We take sa from sa, meaning a vertical supporting stem, and we combine it with ma, water. Stem plus water equals sama, sky. The sky is understood as this symbolic space created by the vertical extension, the stem, holding up that ascending water. So what we're really looking at here is a conceptual portmanteau. This whole analytical model assumes that ancient language wasn't just a random collection of arbitrary labels slapped onto objects. Instead, the language was a structural, phonetic simulation of how nature actually operates. Blending these syllables suggests that the name of a thing inherently contains the catalog of how it was created. Rain is literally named as water reaching its edge. Sky is named as water supported by an atmospheric stem. Honestly, it's an incredibly poetic yet structurally sound way to view the very invention of language.
Section 4. The Bull and the Law of Permanence.
To totally grasp the genius of this visual layout, I want you to shift your focus all the way to the bottom element of the artifact, where this entire cycle begins and ends. Focus your eyes on that distinct, carved bowl shape resting right at the base. In this dynamic interpretation, this isn't just some generic geographical stand-in for the earth or the ground. No, it is a structural container. It acts as the semantic fulcrum for the entire visual piece. Think about its mechanical purpose. It's the entity that gathers and contains the liquid water, allowing it to sprout that upward, rising stem on the left. And at the same time, it's the ultimate receiver, the catch basin for the falling rain on the right. Without the bowl, the entire cycle has absolutely no anchor. And this structural bowl brings us to a concept known as the law of permanence. When you view the carving as one complete mechanical unit, the bowl represents containment, while the upper symbols represent the kinetics of transformation. But notice the empty space carved right between them? That void is entirely intentional. It declares that water doesn't just settle and stagnate. It exists in this constant, oscillatory, back-and-forth movement between the containing bowl of the earth and the transforming space of the sky. It's a closed-loop system, a repetitive cycle that guarantees the infinite renewal of life without any interruption. It's literally physics and philosophy carved perfectly into stone.
Which brings us to Section 5. Philosophical interpretation or fact.
Okay, as incredibly captivating as this whole breakdown is, we've got to take a step back, put on our academic hats, and evaluate this objectively. Is this undeniable historical fact, or is it a modern philosophical interpretation? The crucial takeaway is summarized perfectly in this quote. This reading is considered a philosophical visual hypothesis, not a proven, hard historical scientific discovery. It's super important we ground ourselves in reality here. The idea that ancient carvers were consciously diagramming the modern scientific water cycle with evaporation and condensation in mind is what we call anachronistic. It's basically projecting modern scientific knowledge backward onto ancient minds. This analysis definitely relies a lot more on visual symmetry and structural meaning than it does on strict, traditional historical linguistics and hard archaeological proof.
But let's tally up what this hypothesis actually achieves. Even if it isn't a hard scientific fact, it's doing something absolutely extraordinary. It completely reimagined static symbols as dynamic visual systems. It pushes us to move beyond the rigid confines of traditional historical linguistics, which, let's be honest, can sometimes be a bit limiting. By using modern scientific concepts, like the water cycle, to add structural meaning, it provides this breathtaking showcase of how ancient art continues to interact with and deeply inspire the modern philosophical mind. It proves that these ancient artifacts are still alive, still generating incredibly rich meaning thousands of years later.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a massive question to chew on. The next time you speak, read, or look at a piece of ancient art, does a word's name secretly contain the exact physical catalog of how it was created in the natural world? Are we unknowingly speaking the geometry of nature every single day? It completely changes how you look at the architecture of our language and the sheer brilliance of those who carved the very first symbols. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.